No.
Good girl, Leah.
Oh, that's the fish. Gotta be more careful.
Good girl, Leah. Leah, you got it.
It's impossible to keep a dry lens. Oh my God. I've never seen anything like this. Never, ever seen anything like this, guys. I have never ever seen anything like this.
Orcas are awesome. They are highly intelligent and social animals. They are the #1 predator in the ocean and perhaps #2 on the entire planet. Second only to humans. Unlike the great octopus, they are morally ambiguous because they hunt some of the most intelligent animals on the planet. They are prone to acts of sadism, yet they are tremendously compassionate towards their own family, and sometimes even humans. They have even been observed adopting a calf from a different whale species. This documentary will go into great detail about orcas' etymology and evolution, their habitat and hunting patterns, social structures, hunting strategies, and finally conclude with a story that encapsulates everything I cover. A story known as the Law of the Tongue. Let us begin. Orcas are cetaceans, which include whales, dolphins, and porpoises. The genus and species of orca is Orcinus orca. Orcinus means belonging to Orcus, who was the Roman god of the underworld. Befitting, given orca's status as an apex predator in the deep and mysterious ocean. The colloquial name of killer whales comes from sailors observing them hunting larger whale species. Humans have even actively collaborated with orcas, creating a unique subculture, with one of the most interesting collaborations being called the Law of the Tongue. Whales evolved approximately 50 million years ago from land-based mammals who returned to the sea. They lost their hair and whiskers, becoming more streamlined and lined with blubber, their hands and feet morphing into paddles to better adapt to their new environment, eventually adapting so well to the ocean that they couldn't survive outside of it. Based on molecular and fossil record analysis, it has been hypothesized that hippopotamuses, oddly enough, are one of the closest living cousins to whales. Orcas are the most prevalent along the Pacific Northwest, near Norway, and the higher latitudes of the southern oceans. In the North Pacific, orcas hunt either locally as residents or in wider but still limited ranges as transients, meaning close by but still away from their preferred hunting ground, most common around Antarctic regions with high concentrations of ice, which make navigation and survival challenging. Orcas near the Antarctic regions typically exhibit more migrational patterns with their hunting, moving up to 5,800 miles. It's speculated that these migration patterns may be due to rejuvenating and recovering skin in warmer waters, where they use less energy to maintain body heat and to possibly avoid ice formations during winter periods. The skin of the orca is key to both maintaining their body heat and locomotion. They have even been spotted hunting in shallow waters only a few meters deep. There are two more important adaptations that have enabled orcas to become apex predators: their color schema and echolocation. Orcas are primarily black with white spots around their eyes and a white underbelly, with a gray patch on their back behind their dorsal fin called a saddle. This color schema creates counter shading, which helps them blend in from above or below the surface of the ocean, helping to obscure the shape of their body. From above, they blend into the dark ocean, and from below, they blend into the sunlit water, helping them catch prey off guard. Like with sperm whales and dolphins, orcas use echolocation, both to hunt and communicate with each other. What's interesting about this is how pods develop their own dialects, meaning that each one forms their own microsociety, where they have their own unique language and whale songs. Not only does this help them identify with each other, but also coordinate hunting strategies. The further away geographically, the more distinct and unique orcas' dialectics and whale songs become, just like humans. The basic social unit for orcas are called matrilines, which is a group of orcas connected from the same maternal ancestry. Orcas are matriarchal societies, in spite of the male orcas being larger. This unit is very similar to our own nucleus families, showing the strongest bond among all social orders for orcas. Above these matrilines are pods, which are a group of matrilines that travel together, like our extended families. Above that social link are clans, which typically share similar ancestry, dialects, whale songs, and travel together. Finally, there are communities, which are not necessarily linked by genealogy, but rather geographical proximity. They still will share some similar dialectics and songs with each other, sometimes even mating with other pods, extending the matrilines. Orcas are highly social and intelligent animals, using tactics and cooperation to hunt their prey. Different pods will develop and pass on different tactics to their progeny. Think of this as orcas' oral history. They may lack the ability to write and paint, but they still learn from their past. Here are some interesting examples. Orcas will herd fish into a ball near the surface and then stun them with their tails to feast. They will use team tactics to hunt the largest quarry in the ocean, baleen whales. One witness saw 30 orcas hunting a blue whale, with 2 in the front and 2 in the back to flank the large cetacean. Then the rest surrounded the whale from the sides and underneath, boxing it in and preventing any escape. Some orcas even launched themselves onto the back of the whale, blocking its blowhole to stop their breathing and disorienting the poor whale, pushing it down to drown it, biting and relentlessly attacking for 5 hours, before relenting their assault. Orcas have been observed driving and trapping dolphins in bays and ramming and stunning sea lions before dragging them underwater to drown, even launching seals with their powerful tails into the air. They will even hunt great white sharks for their coveted livers. In 2023, there was an incident near South Africa where a pair of orcas attacked and killed 17 seven-gill sharks, eating only their livers, leaving their carcasses to wash into shore. These orcas have been observed doing this behavior since 2015. They're called port and starboard for their bent dorsal fins, one bent to the left and the other to the right. In 2017 and 2019, the odd couple killed many great white sharks in South Africa's False Bay, again only eating the livers. Eventually, nearly all of the bay's great white sharks moved out of the area, presumably seeking a safer neighborhood. Quote, "When you have highly intelligent, social, and adaptable hunters like an orca, or, like humans, they come up with weird behaviors every now and again," says zoologist Danielle Claude at Flinders University in Australia. Quote, "They have different cultures, and we see that in killer whales across the world." Claude points to orcas that hunt seals off the beach or those in Canada that wore dead salmon as hats. Quote, "We're pretty good at doing stupid trends," said Claude, "so I don't think we should be criticizing them." In 2020, orcas were observed attacking small ships off the coast of Spain and Portugal, ramming into the vessels and destroying their rudders, rendering them immobilized and sinking. 236 of these incidences were documented, with 20% occurring near the Strait of Gibraltar. It is important to note that these incidences didn't result in attacks or injuries on people directly, only their ships. These attacks could be a result of a bad experience with fishing vessels by this pod of orcas. It is still unknown. Quote, "They learned this behavior and have been having some fun," said Spitzer, a marine biologist with the Institute of Marine Research in Norway. Quote, "Nobody knows why. Hunting practices is one theory. It seems to be quite aggressive, but the same group is doing it. So far, it's not been seen elsewhere. They still swim with the orcas here in Norway without any concern." There is one true story that exemplifies the complex intelligence and social interactions of orcas: the law of the tongue. I apologize in advance for any mispronunciations of names or words. For generations in Eden, a location in southern Wales, Australia, indigenous people hunted alongside orcas, originating with the Thawa people, who are members of the Yuin Nation in eastern Australia. Orcas were viewed as brothers to the Thawa, being so important culturally and spiritually that they believed any Thawa who died would become reincarnated as an orca, remaining as one tribe, whether man or whale. The Thawa were so close to the orcas, they would even swim with them, holding onto their dorsal fins without getting injured. They would sing to the biawas, the word for orcas, as they hunted alongside them for generations. One orca in particular became legendary by garnering both love and respect. Old Tom, 23 feet long and more than 6 tons in weight, he hunted with whalers for 30 years. Europeans began to colonize Eden and dispossess the Thawa people. At first, these European colonizers viewed the orcas as competitors and as a nuisance, but one family found a way to carry on the Thawa people's tradition. The Scottish whalers, the Davidsons. They hired the skilled Thawa, who in turn taught them how to hunt with the orca. Beyond the Davidsons treating the orcas fairly, there are reports that the killer whales weren't too keen on helping any other whalers in the area, perhaps owing to their eventual use of cannon harpoons and other explosive weapons. In contrast, the Davidsons used traditional hand-thrown harpoons and took to revering the orcas as the natives did, earning the trust of the orcas through their actions and respect.
Tom used to come into the entrance to the river, the Kaya River, and he'd flop-tail, what we call flop-tail, at the entrance to the river. And old George would be up on the headlands watching, because he heard this flop-tail, and he'd go straight up there to watch. And Tom would be there flop-tailing until he saw the whale boats come out. Then he would lead the boats to wherever the whale was trapped, and the killers would be swimming backwards and forwards across this entrance to keep the whale in that until the boats came out, and then they'd help. And the boats could get into and harpoon the whale. And I was there the whole time. to my way of thinking, they're even better than sheepdogs. They really were. They had minds better than the human being's mind.
The whole town was immersed in this. There's one day they were playing cricket. The whalers played some team in town, and this went on, and the match was at a vital stage when somebody yelled, "Rusho!" That's what they used to call it, Rusho. So they all dropped bats and stumps and everything and raced for the boats. There's another time, the church, there's a little church still there in the town, down on the edge of the cliff, and that was the Catholic Church. And the priest was saying Mass in the church one Sunday morning, and he just near the finish, and he turned from the altar round to the congregation and said, "Dominus vobiscum." And he looked, the church was nearly empty. Someone had come up to the door and said, "Rusho, Rusho." And they all rushoed out of the church.
He would lead the whalers to where the quarry was, sometimes even pulling the lines of the boats to get them moving faster and in the right direction. What's fascinating is how the orcas seemed to recognize the Davidsons and only helped them with whaling and not the competition, showing a clear intelligence and affection. The law of the tongue only applied to those whom respected the accord. Quote, "Even though it may appear to be far-fetched, it happened in front of my eyes, and there's so much evidence here in Eden," said Douglas Ireland. Quote, "It's quite a high level of trust that those whalers put into the killer whales to guide them and not to lead them astray," says Danielle Claude. Quote, "And there's plenty of reports of the killer whales guiding them very explicitly." The killers would then patrol in and out along the bay, trapping the whale inside. They often led the attack, harassing, biting, driving the whale underwater where they could not breathe, and even attempting to cover their blowholes by launching themselves in the back of the whale. The accord that facilitated this symbiotic relationship was for the whalers to allow the orcas to eat the tongues and lips of the whales as a reward. Hence the name of the contract, the Law of the Tongue. The whalers left the carcass anchored on a buoy for up to 2 days to allow the killer whales to eat the tongue and lips before towing in the carcass for their own share of the prize. These killers became so central to the local town economy that even the children of the town would know them by shape and color of the fins and saddle. Hooky, Humpy, Tom, and Stranger, to name only a few. Even in this brutal and gruesome collaboration, the orcas would still find time to play, whether by grabbing and hanging onto the harpoon ropes, which did result in old Tom's teeth being ground down, or sometimes even tow the fisher boats around playfully. The orcas would even tug on the harpoon ropes to help pull the whales towards the whaler boats.
The killer whale, terrible playful, the killer whale, to grab onto the fin young when he come alongside the boat. And we used to be over snapper fishing, and they have the kelly line down there, like anchored on a snapper ground, and the killer whale would come along, grab onto the line, and tow you around, even a 27-foot boat. Couldn't take so far, just flying around, you know.
The whales used to smash the boats. They were always smashing the boats.
We got too close and got it lashed by the tail. It was just matchwood from then on.
Put her up there! Stand back, sit right underneath!
The whalers had a name for this big tail coming down. It was called the Hand of God. And I guess if you had a guilty conscience, you wouldn't want to get too close to the Hand of God.
George Davidson was the lead whaler for this outfit. Whaling was a dangerous profession. After landing a harpoon into a whale, they often would flee for their life, causing the rope attached to the harpoon to be pulled violently forward. If you weren't careful, your foot or leg could be caught in the rope, and you would get violently yanked overboard. This happened once to Davidson, where at night he was thrown off after landing a harpoon in his quarry. He was concerned he may get attacked by a shark due to the blood, but then he noticed a big eye swimming next to him. He relaxed, knowing that this was Tom, guarding him until the relief boat came to pick him up. Quote, "I don't think there's been such a combination of trust and friendship between, certainly not anything in the sea and humans," end quote, said eyewitness Alice Auden, age 103, when interviewed in 2004. How this age-old tradition ended was possibly around 1923. Whaling had started to cease and slow, either by overwhaling or perhaps by whales learning about the dangers of Eden and migrating elsewhere. On this fateful day, George Davidson and his friend Logan were fishing. They were surprised to see old Tom, who corralled a small whale towards their boat. George harpooned the whale, then the following occurred. But this particular day, says local historian Barry Smith, quote, "Logan saw a storm coming. He said, 'George, this might be the last whale you get all season. If you leave it for Tom, you'll lose it.' George said, 'But what about Tom?' To which Logan replied, 'Bugger old Tom.' The upshot was a tug-of-war developed between Logan and old Tom, which led to old Tom losing a couple of teeth. Logan's daughter, who was with him that day, remembered her father saying, 'Oh God, what have I done?' An ancient contract had been violated. This tradition officially ended by 1930, when poor old Tom's body washed ashore. The mouth had abscesses from missing teeth, and he may have died of starvation. Given this was 7 years later, it's likely old Tom died primarily of age rather than the incident with Logan and George. Sadly, this pond of orcas seemed to have gone extinct based on DNA analysis from Tom's bones, still preserved to this day in Eden Killer Whale Museum. While it's still unknown how exactly this relationship started, given the oral tradition of the Thawa people, it's speculated to have lasted thousands of years. Quote, "But how it started is another question. I think what I've learned from killer whales is that they're curious, they can be strategic, and when they want something, they know how to get it." End quote. Isabel Reeves. It may seem odd for such a complex relationship to be created. Why not cut out the whalers and take the full prize themselves? While orcas are large apex predators, humpback whales are significantly larger, can grow up to 50 feet long and weigh 40 tons, whereas blue whales can reach 120 feet and weigh as much as 200 tons. It's demanding, challenging, exhausting, and dangerous even for the orcas, resulting in most encounters with larger whales not ending in a kill. So, it was simply just more efficient to herd the whale towards the whalers and let them do the hard bit.
I heard this dreadful, desperate moan. And it was as if it had got beyond its capacity for suffering and despair. It was a terrible noise, like that, only much, much louder. And it seemed to come down the dinghy that side, under the water and up that side. That's how that sound seemed to come to me. And that was when I realised it was a terrible thing they were doing. A terrible thing. They were murdering this beautiful creature.
My cousin says it was murder, but it was a living, and those things were put for people to earn their living with.